everyone. Welcome to our fourth episode of Earth Share. Today we have Rishi Kumar, who teaches, educates, learns, embodies regenerative gardening. He began the Sarvodaya Institute and an urban farm where he grows and has a little nursery. You can catch his teaching through Kiss the Ground. He has a course on there, and he also has an exciting new project for any garden lover around called Healing Gardens, which we'll be discussing shortly. So let's welcome him, and as a reminder, you can always ask questions in the chat, send us your thoughts and feedback. We are now inviting Rishi.
Hello.
Hello, Rishi.
Hello.
Hey, nice to see you both.
You too. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Nice you found a spot outside.
I know.
Yeah. I came back to my parents just a couple minutes ago, so I'm in the original garden here.
Oh, it looks lovely. So welcome. We can jump right in and ask our first question, which we love to ask everybody on here. What does nature mean to you?
That is an interesting question. That's something I've had to think about quite a bit over the last, I don't know, or it's something I've thought about, in the last 10 years quite a bit. And I've come to realize that nature means everything. And in some sense, to me, it's become a word that either we limit the meaning of, or we've chosen the meaning to be, probably it's a word we've chosen to limit the meaning of. And a lot of times a word that we use, in my view, maybe inappropriately. Nature is everything. Nature is everywhere, and I think the what we're doing as urban gardeners is really realizing that, and realizing that nature doesn't. You don't need to go out anywhere to find nature. It's always in front of you, and it's always with you because she is you. So that's my take.
Nice. Where and what were your earliest memories of nature?
My earliest memories of what most of us would call nature is just kind of being in this backyard. Actually, my mom has been gardening my whole life, and we would be out here. We had a chicken coop when I was really young, and we had a bunch of cats, and I remember her like growing tomatoes in pots, and we used to just kind of run around. It didn't look anything like what you're seeing behind me now. We didn't have, it was just a lawn and a little bit of trees around. So that's, I don't have a lot of memories from when I was really small of like being in a forest or being in the mountains. I have more memories of just being just right here.
Just personally, can you describe some of the plants behind you? I'm curious that it's grown so magnificently over there.
Yeah, I'll give you a little look around here. We have, so again, this is my parents' house. This is the garden that I started working on in 2009, about with my mom, and so we have like 80 something trees, mostly fruit trees. And what you're seeing behind me, there's this plant right here is African bitterleaf. It's a medicinal, used a lot in like Ghana, and I think that Northeast Africa region. We have behind that there's an elderberry, there's a Fuyu persimmon. If we come over here, there is a Pakistani mulberry, there's a macadamia nut behind that, there's dragon fruits growing behind those. And then if we go this way, um, we have bananas growing, and we have apricot tree, a guava tree, more dragon fruit, our vegetable gardens back there, and there's a lot of trees. If we look up here, I got grapevines growing over our patio cover. So we have our own little jungle here.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a nice
So
space to relax.
Yeah.
starting from zero, growing up in the garden you're in now, what kind of what work are you doing now? What projects are you excited about?
Uh, I'm I'm getting more excited about teaching again. That's been something that's been part of my work, since the very beginning that I started in this field of urban gardening and urban farming, and I started to feel, a couple of years ago, I started to feel like, okay, I'm just, been teaching the same thing year after year, and I'm not feeling like anything new is coming up, and I also wasn't feeling like what I was teaching was really getting to the core issues that, we needed to get to as a society, and in our personal development. Um, and so I am quite excited about teaching again, because I've kind of been through some processes that have really opened my mind, opened my eyes to, I don't know, some strange and kind of exciting new ideas for me, and I've found that, and in the classes that I've had, people have been connecting with those ideas in the same way that that I have been. So that's been really exciting, and I've been getting a lot of responses from students who have taken my recent courses that they've really been impacted by these new concepts, and I'm getting pictures of new gardens. My online classes have had students from around the country and around the world, so it's kind of cool to see, like, people are sending me pictures from, of course, lots of people from LA, and lots of people from the Bay Area, but also like Connecticut and Pennsylvania and Florida and Hawaii. So that's been really just fun, you know.
So
I
I
love
know you've offered classes through Kiss the Ground. Are there other classes that you're offering as well?
primarily I've been teaching through Kiss the Ground right now. We also do Q&As through our nonprofit organization, Sarvodaya Institute. So we, kind of do a little bit of teaching that way, but primarily my courses have been through Kiss the Ground. And I have, with coronavirus, things have been kind of thrown off schedule. So I'm probably going to have some courses with them coming up soon as well. Things have are getting reorganized, so we're still trying to figure out what's going to be happening there. And then the other thing I'm really excited about right now is a new project that it's not a new project, something I started about a year ago with a friend of mine, and we're just starting to get to the point where we're talking about it with other people and sharing and inviting people in. And that project is called Healing Gardens Community, and it's all about connecting people with the healing power of gardens. Especially people who don't have access to gardens in urban areas, and even in rural areas. We expect to be expanding into rural areas soon, but right now our focus is in urban areas, and of course a lot in Los Angeles.
How can I know? I think I've seen a couple of Instagram. I know I've seen Instagram posts. I think there's a couple videos up as well
Yeah.
for healing gardens. Are there is that the best way people can find out, or are there other outlets?
Yeah, we have an Instagram account, and there's a couple videos on there. But I'd be happy to kind of explain it here. Basically, um, there's so many of us like yourselves who live in urban areas and understand that gardens are these really rich and dynamic spaces that have so much to offer, right? Like there is, I think what a lot of people focus on is the food, right? Obviously, like gardens can offer food, and that's been a strong focus of the urban gardening movement in the last decade or so. And that's of course how I got into gardening was through food. Then there's the educational aspect of gardens, where we're learning about how this world functions on a really basic level, right? We're learning about soil, we're learning about plants, about growth, about transformation, about composting. Um, and then there's another level which I feel like we're starting to hear more about, and even I am starting to this is the piece for me that has been most transformational in the last couple of years, is that gardens have an incredible healing power, right? And they're basically, big complex metaphors for us to understand the same processes that we go through, in our own lives, emotionally and spiritually. We can actually see them physically represented in a garden, right? And so gardens have this, and I think that's what really draws people to gardens, even though we focus a lot in urban gardening on food and on learning about food and on cooking and other various forms of education. What I found is that what really draws people into gardens, what really keeps people in gardens, and I'm sure you both can speak to this yourselves, but what we're really looking for, and what I really, looking at my own process and my own path journey through urban gardening, like what I've really been looking for and what really keeps me in the garden is just being in the garden, right? Like the experience of being in the garden and seeing these transformations, seeing the power that, the powerful ways that gardens can express themselves. And there's just all these like hidden metaphors, like compost being, I think, one of the ones that is really pertinent to our world right now. Compost being this transformation of or not a transformation, but really like a recognition that everything has value, a recognition that even what we call trash and even what we call waste has value, and actually that there's no such thing as trash and waste. And that's this concept that we've invented in our society to denigrate and degrade others. And compost is a way that we can really physically see and be a part of this process, which is telling you, hey, there's no such thing as waste, there's no such thing as trash. And actually these are these things that we're paying to throw away, that we're giving energy to get rid of, these have value for us, and these have a lesson for us, and they can actually benefit us, benefit our soil, benefit the plants, create healthy food for us. And so I think there's all these important hidden metaphors within the garden that we can only see when we really are spending quality time in the garden. And I don't know if I even said yet what Healing Gardens does, but that was like a big
I want to back up a minute. You had said that you came to gardening and farming through food. Can you talk more about what you were doing before that, and what led you in that direction?
Yeah, so I was a computer science major in college, and I was very fascinated by technology, and really thought that was gonna change the world. And and then, and I actually chose to be a computer science major. Wasn't pressured into it or anything. Um, and when I got into college and ended up, doing what I thought I wanted to do, and just being on the computer all day, and not feeling like, not having like a whole body experience in my work, and it was draining, and it felt a bit extractive. Um, and so I was looking for something that was a little more holistic, I think. Didn't realize what I was looking for back then, but just wanted to get outside, and I wanted to do something that was going to contribute to my health. I was kind of experimenting with different diets at the time. I was learning about organic food, and so finally, what I realized was like, hey, if I want to learn about food, if I want to learn about being about health, I need to actually grow some food. Like, I need to understand what that process is. I need to understand what healthy food looks like. How is healthy food grown? And so that's how I got into gardening in the very beginning.
Okay. We like to ask everyone on here how they would describe community. And I love that everyone has a completely different answer. But if you want to talk about the community that you feel you work within and that supports you, and this connection you have to how you describe community.
Yeah. Community is really important. And not because, community is all about relationships. And what I'm learning is that relationships are kind of our very existence. Our body is a community of relationships among cells, and we don't, what we learn in our schooling, in our culture, is that, we have this concept of like, I think therefore I am, and we have this like individualistic self-conception, and community is all about understanding that our self, we don't exist without others, right? And understanding that we're constantly in relationship, and we're constantly in exchange of energy, and that we need the support of others. Others need our support, and and that we just don't, we don't exist without these relationships. Relationships are fundamental to us, and so to be in a community is to be surrounded by people who will uplift you, and to be surrounded by people that you are uplifting, and you're in a this kind of mutualistic, regenerative relationship. And also, I would say that community exists beyond our relationships with people, and community is even if maybe you can't find relationships with people right now in your life, especially during this quarantine. It's difficult to find that. Might be a little difficult to find that human connection. So you can definitely find some form of community with plants. You can find some form of community with soil. When I am at home and I'm feeling lonely, a lot of times I'll go out and just check on my worms and kind of hang out with them. And I'll sit and I'm watching the butterflies flapping around, and that is a sense of community.
What made you want to work specifically within urban farms?
So I never made like a conscious choice to be in urban gardening. I graduated college, I went to stay on some farms, and then I moved. I moved back in with my parents. I didn't have anywhere else to go, and so I started working on this garden, and it was um, it was definitely like a powerful experience for me to see that, hey, this little space, um, this space that used to be a lawn and was like this specific way my whole life. Like I grew up for 18 years in this house, and it looked just about the same the whole time. And so it was a powerful experience for me to work in this garden and work with this garden and create something brand new and expansive and expressive. Um, and I think what what my going back to maybe your first question of what is nature, or how do I define nature, being in urban gardening has been this slow process of me understanding that everything is nature, and that we don't need to look for, we don't need to save some environment that's out there. We don't need to save some conception of nature that is out there that we need to go to, or that we need to pay money for some other nonprofit to handle. you know um, it's understanding that, hey, this is nature, like right behind me, and this is nature that has been um, forgotten about, abused, oppressed, silenced, and and if I can just recognize what is behind me, um, then I can be part of allowing that, or working with that soil and helping this soil find her expression, right? And it's like, it's just like a it's like any person, right? Like if you abuse a person, if you insult them all day, if you treat them poorly, then they close up, and they bind up, and they contract. And soil does the same thing. If you abuse soil, she contracts, and she doesn't want to say anything. She doesn't want to tell you her secrets, and it's not like her power is gone. Her power is still there. Her value is still there. She just has, she doesn't want to share it with you. And so gardening to me is this, almost this form of therapy, and this form of communion, where you're saying to the you're saying to the soil, and you're saying to the garden, like, hey, I recognize you, I'm seeing you, and I understand that you've been hurt, and so I'm going to work with you, and I'm going to treat you well. And when you do treat her well, she responds in this way that, like, you just never could have imagined, right? And so that's why I like urban garden. The reason I stay in urban areas is because I think these soils are the ones that we've abused the most and degraded the most, and said to the point where we're like, hey, your only value is to cover you up with asphalt and park my car on you. And so I think it's really important for people to see that soil under that parking lot is not dead. It's not valueless. Like, we can actually pull that asphalt up, and we can care for that soil, and she'll do this, So that's why I stay in urban gardening.
We've been, it's funny, it's the way you've been talking about this. One of the conversations that I know we've all been having in a lot of the organizations we work with is about equity and access, and in what spaces people feel safe. This is definitely something we're talking about at Arlington. As a public garden that's free for anyone to come to, do people actually feel taken care of, safe, and welcomed? So I'm wondering, in our human community, how you see that manifesting in the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're in a very special moment, I think, when large parts of our society are expressing their the pain that they're going through, and the pain that they've been going through, and expressing very clearly that we're not listening. and we, we're not treating them like, we're not treating them like people, um, and I think that is, that's again where I see the power of these urban gardens to help people reflect, right, and understand that if people don't cry out for no reason, and people don't feel neglected for no reason, and and it's not like, and yeah, there's, these things don't happen just like that, right? Like we all participate in them in some way, shape, or form, and so I think that just again, um, seeing that our society has a kind of, or our culture has this very uh, abusive underlayment to it, right? And if we can start to see that in soil, we can start to see that in people, and then we can start to say to ourselves, okay, what can we do? And that's literally how I understand things. Like I understand through gardening, like I understand how to treat soil, right? I understand how to care for soil. I understand how to express my love for soil. So I literally like think about, when I'm thinking about a person, I think like, okay, this person is feeling abused or is feeling closed up, so I think myself, okay, if that, if I was thinking about the soil, like how would I treat the soil if the soil had been abused, right? How would I respond? So I respond to the person in the same way. Like, it doesn't help if your soil has been abused. It doesn't help to be like, you suck, soil. Like it's all your fault. You know, it what what does help is saying like, hey, like I hear, I see what's going on. Like I'm learning about your history. Um, I want to, I want to offer some care to you, on a very simple level. Like I just want to feed, I'm going to feed you. I'm going to provide you with water, and then, getting into more complicated um, forms of care, like, hey, what kind of relationships are you looking for? Like, who do you want to hang out with? What are the ways that I can meet your needs? Like, what are your desires? What are your deep desires? So that's that's where I see urban gardening, um, just providing us with lessons for what's happening in our society today.
Do you feel like right now there's a shift going on culturally to express that desire to be around more gardens, to be able to farm anywhere at your own house or space or empty lot?
Yes, I think that's happening in a huge way right now. We've myself, my mom does the same work as me, zero waste farmer. She just joined our call here too. Um, so we've been seeing a tremendous increase in the interest in urban gardening, um, and I think it's at this moment it's just a really powerful way to understand um, the moment that we're in, right? Like urban garden, of course I have moments of fear and anxiety around the place that we're in as a culture, um, and it's in moments where I can connect with the garden and say, hey, um, there are periods when there's damage, and there's periods when there's hurt, and we can move through those, um, and we can respond to those in a way where we're learning, right? And we can respond to those in a way where we're helping those who have been through the abuse, and it's also in a very important time to recognize, all the traumas we ourselves experience, right? Like I think we can't recognize trauma in others until we've recognized trauma in ourselves. And so, just being in the garden and understanding, like, I don't know, I'm surrounded that, a very important process for me was just like understanding that I am surrounded by soil that's been abused, right? I am surrounded by land that's been abused. I'm surrounded by land whose caretakers have been taken away from her, and forgotten. And then, the next step is like, okay, if I'm surrounded by land that's been abused, and now we're understanding I'm surrounded by people that have been abused, like, oh, I've probably been abused in many ways myself, which I may not understand right now. And if we can start to understand that, then we can actually start to see, we can start to see we can start to understand what other people are going through, I think.
I just want to remind folks that we have a few questions of our own, but then when we finish, it's a Q&A. So if you have questions for Rishi, just put them in the chat. We'll take them down and we'll ask those questions. I think Paloma has a big one.
Last one. Okay. What, for you personally, what is your hope and vision going forward that you can just help spread throughout your community and globally?
Yeah, my hope and vision going forward is, I really hope we can start to recognize, like, the value of everyone. And I use the term everyone, and I'm trying to be specific with my words in that we need to stop seeing this world as a collection of dead things that sometimes come to life, and we need to start seeing this world as a living being in expressing herself in many, many different ways. And so if we can start to recognize that and understand that, this everyone requires care and everyone requires love, and we can't we can't help people heal, or we can't help people grow by force, right? Like, you can't stare at your tomato plant and just be like, grow, like, it just that doesn't work, right? Like, what you can do for your tomato plant is you can offer her some shade if it's too hot. You can offer her some water, you can offer her some food, you can talk to her, you can say, hey, like, you're beautiful and you're wonderful, and you can just think those things about her. um,
It's funny when you say that. It's a funny idea in our mind that you would force a plant to grow tomatoes, right? But in reality, there are so many examples of us forcing uh, productivity, right? So we force our lands
yeah,
to create food for us.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then when you think about that as abuse of the land, abuse of the plants and the living animals that are part of that machine, right?
yeah. we
Uh,
treat That's
when
the way
you
we
when
treat
you
it, right? We treat it as a machine, and then we are constantly applying force to get this machine to produce, and we do that to ourselves, right? We treat ourselves, we're trying to force ourselves to be productive in whatever way, right? And we value things, we value people, we value beings based on their productivity. So
and
uh,
when you think about that food on the other end, right? How could the food that we feed ourselves with,
mhm,
how could that possibly be healthy food if it's
right,
created in that way? Just like what you're saying, which is how could we be healthy people if we're not caring for ourselves, if we're not caring for each other? It, it's a it's a it I think what you're describing pushes those ideas way out, and how you think about, you also brought it up when you're talking about community, that our community shouldn't be limited to just the human community, that we're part of a larger community, and that there's a lot of abuse in all of those relationships.
Yeah, there is. There is. And we can also understand, through the garden that, uh, the tomato can also, the tomato can produce fruit through force, right? The tomato can also produce food through care and through love, and it's not producing under threat, right? It's producing under creativity and expression. It's like, it's like for people, like, you can either abuse them and force them to work, or you can say, hey, like, you're amazing, we love you, we want you to find what you want to do. And people don't, when you don't force someone to work, that doesn't mean they stop working, right? Like, people don't, who are full of love, don't just like sit around and lay and take naps, right? Like, they do take naps, but they also like find something that that has meaning for them and has value for them, and they express themselves, right? uh, and so that, I think that's where, what I would, I'd love to see a society where everyone is treated with value and treated with care, and there's lots of love, and people are working out of expression, or working from a place of expression and contribution.
Circling back to Healing Gardens community, is the idea of healing, people healing the land healing people, or that synchronicity?
It's all of the above. And so what we're trying to do, I don't think I never got to the point of actually explaining the concept. So what we're trying to do is basically just create a way for people who are the caretakers of gardens. So, you both have a beautiful garden that I've been to, and this is my mom's beautiful garden here. But not everyone has these spaces. Not everyone is privileged enough to have these spaces. Not everyone has the knowledge to create or to care for these spaces. And so what we're trying to do is basically connect people who don't have access to these spaces with the people that are creating these spaces and the gardens that already exist in the community. And so, to explain it in a simpler way, like, if you live in my mom's neighborhood and you want a place to spend an hour and meditate or do yoga or just sit and watch the birds, or watch the butterflies and listen to the birds singing, like, you can book an hour at my mom's garden and come and sit here and use it in a way that is therapeutic and healing for you. You could come and bring your family and do the same thing. And so what we're trying to create is a system where gardeners are making some money off of the these gardens that they've created, because like you guys know, like, we put a lot of time, we put a lot of energy, we put a lot of money into these gardens, and from most urban gardeners that I know, and from my own experience, like, it's often at a bit of a financial and time and even emotional cost to ourselves, because it's hard to hold these spaces when society doesn't value them. And so we want actually for gardeners to be able to make a bit of money to hold this space and to enrich this space and make and add more compost and plant more trees and plant more flowers. Like, we want gardeners to be able to enrich their spaces, and we also want people who don't have access to these spaces to be able to enjoy their therapeutic value. And we're hoping that with all the research that's coming out right now about the therapeutic value of gardens, we've found some studies that say that spending time in gardens or spending time in the forest, it works as well or works better than any prescription, medication for anxiety or depression. So we're hoping that at some point we would be able to even offer time at healing gardens through insurance. That's kind of our long-term goal, to have insurance companies be paying for your garden therapy. But we're starting where we are. We're going to start by just opening up these gardens. The garden hosts as well will be able to teach classes or host workshops, host events, and then one of the major services we are providing is that we are insuring the whole transaction. So that the garden is insured, the guest is insured, the gardener is insured, so that everyone can feel safe in sharing their space and going to these spaces.
Well, it's very exciting, and I know Arlington Gardens wants to be involved with it, and we are definitely open and free for anyone to come and get their garden therapy on. But thank you so much for joining us, Rishi. It's been a real pleasure.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rishi.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks everybody else too for joining us in the audience.
Yeah, thank you all for coming, and feel free to follow me here on Instagram and check out Healing Gardens. We have an Instagram page up, healinggardens.co. Yeah, see you later.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank
Thank you.
you.